Agitorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Yesterday we saw with Pope Leo XIII on his encyclical Humanum Genus, condemning Freemasonry, we saw how these filthy rats, they want to get a hold of the marital bond and just treat marriage like a drive-through restaurant. Get married in the day, 2 weeks later get a divorce, or 2 years later, or 2 decades later. They treat marriage like a natural contract that can be broken. That's a totally Masonic victory. Why? Because if you succeed in doing that, what do you do to the family?
You destroy it.
Yeah, there's no more stability. And children who grow up in broken homes, rare are the ones who come out virtuous. Rare. I mean, it really harms the children. It really does. And often they blame themselves. You know, it's my fault, mom and dad divorced. What did I do wrong? And it's nothing good from it. And then, of course, the education of the children, education of youth at all levels, even up to college level. They want to get a handle on education of the youth. And I like this point that Pope Leo XIII brought out in paragraph 21, that in the education of the youth, they want to make sure that for the children, nothing is true. In the education of youth, nothing is to be taught in the matter of religion as of certain and fixed. So there's no truth. There's no absolute truth. There's no true one God. There's no true Blessed Trinity. There's no true incarnation. Everything is just opinion. And if they can smash the faith in this way in the children, they have no faith. They're just a bunch of little communists. Little pieces of bark floating on the sea, floating affected by every wave that hits them. They're not grounded. Poor youth. We have generations of youth, almost 200 years of youth coming out of the government schools, secular government public schools. Poor children, poor youth, poor things. All right, we're second half of page 17 on the bottom. With the greatest unanimity, the sect of the Freemasons also endeavors to take to itself the education of
youth.
Yes, they go for the young. One of the great philosophers before Christ came, it might have been Cicero or Seneca, I don't remember which, but whenever he came to a town or a city, he would ask, one of the first questions asked, what's the state of the youth? How are the youth? And if they could say, well, they're just hanging around doing nothing, they're getting in trouble, they're idle, they're immoral, he would say that there's no future for this city, or it will be a bad future, or it will be overtaken by an enemy. But if the youth were being attended to and being well formed in a good education, and with the Greek education, of course, and the Roman education, it involved military training, so there was physical training, PT, physical training, military training, and also music. For the Greek world, the music was a huge part of their formation. And not rock music. Plato condemned rock and roll music. Aristotle condemned it. They condemned rock and roll music. They would never allow it in the state. And they say if such a music as rock and roll takes over a nation or a city, it'll tear down the walls. The walls will come down. Meaning the morals, everything will collapse. So another reason why the Freemasons have made it institutional. They institutionalized rock and roll music. You just hear it everywhere you go, and it's just so unpleasant. And you go to a restaurant, or even get something to eat quick, or in a grocery store when you're traveling, and you just hear this. It's part of their desacralization of daily life. Take away the sacredness of what's supposed to be sanctifying the daily life. They contaminate it. So in the Greek and Roman education, there was the physical training, and then there was the musical training, and plus they had what was called the liberal arts education, which was some formation in math, grammar, Latin grammar or Greek grammar, music, and some understanding of the stars. And not astrology, which is making religion out of the study of the stars, but astronomy is a true science. Christopher Columbus, that great Catholic soul, who the liberals hate, by the way, because he was so Catholic, but how did he cross the ocean? Following the what?
The stars.
The constellation of the stars. I mean, that was the GPS. For a long distance travel, it was the stars. It's quite amazing. And that's completely lost. It's lost. Most people today hardly know the constellations. But it's a wonderful thing. That was the GPS. And you had to there was a true science to it. It wasn't just, you had to calculate and figure out. So it's a huge tribute to those early settlers who crossed the ocean on following the stars. So part of the education of youth, if they were well formed and intended to, then that Greek philosopher would say, there's a future for this city. There's a future for this nation, which will be good. So as you form the youth, so tomorrow will be. And that's not saying much for our modern world, is it? The poor, poor youth. Poor youth. With the technology, the corrosiveness of technology, without moderation, and then let alone the immorality available on technology, such as just raw pornography and the most perverse sorts. Poor little children. They're exposed to all this very young. The average kid sees pornography now at age 6 and 7. It's horrifying. It's so tragic that their innocence is assaulted by adults who allow this to happen. So that's why there'll be a lot of adults in hell. A lot of them in hell who are behind advertisement, Hollywood movies, and radio, technology, Zuckerberg, and all these powerful ones. They will have a very low place in hell because above them will be all the souls they drag there too. They think, the Masons, that they can easily mold to their opinions the soft and pliant age and bend it whither they will, and that nothing can be more fitted than this to enable them to bring up the youth of the state after their own plan, meaning their godless plan. Twist their minds from a young age. Children automatically are drawn to God. They're drawn to the innocence and goodness of God, the beauty of God. And to twist that innocence is a crime. What does our Lord say? Those who scandalize the little ones, woe to them who scandalize the little ones. Better
a millstone be tied around their neck and they be thrown into the depths of the sea.
Than to scandalize one of these little ones, whose angels see the face of my Father, the guardian angels. So yeah, it's a huge crime, an unspeakable crime. And especially when you get the rainbow movement involved, this whole transgender library thing, and the filthy books that were imposed on the children. But even in the 70s and 80s, Archbishop Lefebvre condemned the Quebec catechisms and the Dutch catechism in Holland, where the Catholic bishops approved filthy, pornographic catechism books. Can you imagine? And Father Wickens, who was a great priest in New Jersey, he was kicked out of his diocese by Bishop Garrity in the 70s and 80s because he vehemently opposed the sex education of the Catholic kids in school. You can't put this stuff in a Catholic kid's head, he said. What are you doing? And the bishop kicked him out, of course. But he continued keeping the Latin Mass, and many of our faithful came from there. Good faithful and some vocations. So Father Wickens was a great priest. He was a basketball coach and taught at a school, but he kept the faith. So they want the minds of the youth. When President Calles came to power in Mexico in 1926-ish, 25, 26, he said, we are now launching a psychological war. We want the minds of the children, the minds of the youth. So he banned Catholic schools and only forced on everybody secular schools, public schools, government schools, to twist the minds of the young, to form them without prayer, without grace, without dependence on sacraments, without submission, obedience to the true Catholic Church, and to form monsters out of them, just monsters, beasts, or at best, good civilians who are just atheists, good businessmen who have no morals. It's a frightening thing. And this is, yes, there's going to be a lot of millstones around necks on the Day of Judgment because of the scandal given to the children, to little ones. Poor children, when you think of it. And a word has to be said, many parents are careless with internet in their house. Parents are very careless, and it's easy to get careless because you got to always be on guard, always watching. So parents also will have a lot to pay if they're careless and negligent in this matter. Oh, but my son's 14, he can have a cell phone. Well, no, that's too young. You don't put something like that in their hands at that young. Of course, the kids all want one. They all want one by the time they're 8 years old. They're begging for their own cell phone. But parents have to put their foot down and protect the innocence of their children and let them develop the good qualities and skills that they need to develop without these things. The less they have technology in their world, in their childhood, the better. The less technology, the better. They're going to get enough of it when they become adults because now everything is swimming in it. But poor children, poor youth, poor things. So the Freemasons, this is again, what year is this?
1884.
1884, this is well over 100 years ago. And Pope Leo XIII is nailing the truth and exposing these rats of the lodges. And their goal is destroy marriage and destroy the youth. There's a great talk given by John Benari on the great Charles I of Austria, who was incorrupt. His wife was Zita. And the Freemasons drove him out of his country. And he was in exile. And they said, you can come back as long as we, the Masonic powers, have the final say on the education of youth and marriage. So King Charles, what did he do? He said, what did he say? Oh, okay, well, we'll agree with that. At least I can get back to my country and I can compromise on these principles and we can work out a canonical solution. We can work out a deal. We can get favorable recognition, like the new SSPX is all about now. Favorable recognition, favorable deals, canonical setups, but at the price of compromise. Did he do that?
No. He stood his ground.
He stood his ground, and he said, then I don't come back to the country. I will not accept your terms. And he's right. And he and Zita died in exile. They died in exile. And they're saints. They will be great saints, no doubt, canonized someday by the church. His body's incorrupt. So, yes, Archbishop Lefebvre did not bend on principle. And that's the kind of priests and men we need today, is men who will not bend on the most basic principles of the faith. Obvious principles of Christ's divinity, his kingship, the Tridentine Mass. There's no bending with these things. As Monsignor Frépel said, the great anti-liberal in France, the bishop of the Diocese of Angers in France, where there were many martyrs in the French Revolution, including Father Noel Pignot, who ascended the guillotine scaffold with the words "In Troibo Oratory Dei" in his full vestments. And they chopped his head off, and he flew straight to heaven. But this great Monsignor Frépel, here's his name, Monsignor Frépel, F-R-E-P-P-E-L. He said, all right, maybe sometimes there might be a breach of morals in society. Maybe the fashions will get a little too skimpy, or maybe a priest here or there may be liberal and allow, let's say, contraception, or allow a divorce or something. So he says, even if there is a breach of the moral order by liberal Catholics or weak priests or weak bishops, as long as the doctrine is in place, the situation can still be saved. So, in other words, if you got a flat tire, you don't need to trash the whole car. The car is still good. You can save the whole thing by just what? Changing the tire. But if the engine blows up, you can't save the car, and the car flips over and it's all dented and bent. The whole thing is condemned. So his words were, as long as the principles are in place, the situation can be remedied. But once there's compromise on principles, the whole situation is lost. And Bishop Fillet knows this. He knows this. He knew better. I could read you some of his letters before 2012. And he sees very clearly, like Archbishop Lefebvre, we cannot make an agreement with Rome. We cannot get in with modernist Rome until Rome comes back to tradition. Rome proclaims the kingship of Christ. The principles are there. But then, I don't know what got to him. He changed in 2011 and 12. Well, he was always kind of dancing with the liberalism, because throughout the 90s he was involved with Grec. But anyway, they got to him. The liberal, maybe the Masons got to him. I don't know what it was, but he compromised on principles. And once you do that, the situation's lost. The SSPX, its main purpose is now disoriented. Because they used to stand on the unchanging principles. But now they've settled for jurisdiction, recognition, agreements, canonical solution without solving the principles. So it's an irremediable, it cannot be remedied unless they come back to the right principles. And that goes with the whole Catholic Church. Until Rome comes back to the right principles, the whole thing is irretrievably lost. So, but we do know Rome will come back to the faith, will come back to the proclamation of Christ the King. It will happen. but it'll be through Our Lady and a good Pope. So the great Monsignor Frepel, those are great words, really great words. There might be a breach of morals here or there, but as long as the principles are in place, you can save the situation. But once they compromise on principles, it's lost. The principle, it's lost. So the Freemasons, they want to get the hold of the children, of the minds of the young, including university, especially level. Therefore, in the education and instruction of children, they allow no share either of teaching or discipline to the ministers of the church, that is, to the priests, nuns, and brothers. And in many places, they have procured that the education of youth should be exclusively in the hands of laymen, yeah, especially godless laymen. And now in the colleges today, they make sure they get these Marxists, transgender teachers. They make sure they hire these idiots, these scandalous people. Transgender or living in a perverse lifestyle. This is what they're hiring in many of the colleges now. So you get a man coming in and dressed as a woman in a pink dress trying to teach the class. Or a guy who's married to another guy. This is what they're to corrupt and influence the college students, to make it look normal. Make it all look normal. Therefore, in the education and instruction of children, they allow no share, but put it all in the hands of laymen, and that nothing which treats, top of page 18, of the most important and most holy duties of men to God shall be introduced into the instructions on morals. So they learn everything about making money, everything about where to get an abortion, everything about, at best, good engineering classes, because they can't mess that up. Good physics classes, because they can't mess that up. Good mechanics classes, because it's hard to mess that up. But on the other fields, they just destroy. Psychology, sociology, philosophy, theology, they destroy and divorce the youth from God. And what they especially succeed in doing is you get, in the United States, you still have a whole bunch of good kids from decent families. And we might even say decent Protestant families who try to, keep the commandments, believe in the Bible, believe in heaven and hell. And the children grow up like the Amish, like some of the, Protestant groups. They're decent people, and their girls are girls, they're feminine, and their boys are manly. And they come into the colleges believing in God and truths. But what the modern liberal colleges often do now, for many years, is they say, well, these are the Christian set of values of the West, of the Western age. But those set of values are very different from the African set of values, and the South American set of values, and the Asian set of values, and the Chinese set of values. Each people has their own values. So these values can change. So the Western values have already passed. It's already done. We're into a new set of values now. And so they offer them a whole new framework. And they make what is of the past look old and dusty and gone and not worth saving. And we're always have to be changing for the better. And the better in their mind is the whole immoral life of no marriage, just living together and without marriage, without God. Acceptance of all immorality and vice. Abortion, just a normal way of life. Abortion now has become, in most countries and states of the United States and provinces of Canada, a normal means of birth control. Isn't that frightening? Isn't that just horrifying? So at the expense of the pleasures being misused outside of marriage, they kill the babies. Just kill them. It's no big deal. Oh hum, I have to go see the doctor tomorrow, and they kill the baby, and she walks out, and have a nice day. But they don't tell you how many girls die from mistakes in those surgeries. How many girls actually die from those pills, abortion pills? They never tell you that. How many of them or afterwards cannot have any more children? So the destruction of the youth, they're doing it. The Freemasons are doing it. And the Catholic schools are some of the worst. The Novice Ordo Catholic schools are some of the worst. 22. Read it out loud there, Gavril.
Then come their doctrines of politics, in which the naturalists lay down that all men have the same right, and are in every respect of equal and like condition, that each one is naturally free, that no one has the right to command another, that it is an act of violence to require men to obey any authority other than that which is obtained from themselves. According to this, therefore, all things belong to the free people. Power is held by the command or permission of the people, so that when the popular will changes, rulers may lawfully be deposed, and the source of all rights and civil duties is either in the multitude or in the governing authority. When this is constituted according to the latest doctrines, it is held also that the state should be without God, that in the various forms of religion there is no reason why one should have precedence over another, and that they are all to occupy the same place.
So here's modern governments. Paragraph 22 says it all. This false equality. So put women in the men's working zones at the name of equality. Get the woman out of the house and stop having children, or at least as many children. Destroy her. Put her in pants. Put her in immodesty. This is their world. This is the Masonic world we're living in. Separation of church and state. The state should be godless. That's the modern West. This is why we're going to be punished so severely. And all religions have an equal place. The state doesn't admit or practice any religion, but everyone can practice what they want. And also all authority comes from the people. These are all Masonic ideas, and we believe these. Most of us Americans think these are great. We grew up with this. Equality, freedom, the will of the people. But notice these are all condemned by the Catholic Church and by common sense and their Masonic ideas. It just shows how successful the Freemasons have been, that even traditional Catholics think like Masons. So we got to convert and come back to what the Church truly teaches. And as priests, do everything to restore the kingship of Christ. And laymen must do everything to restore the social kingship of Christ. But the first step is to get the right ideas in our heads. 23. Loud and clear.
That these doctrines are equally acceptable to the Freemasons, and that they would wish to constitute states according to this example and model, is too well known to require proof. For some time past they have openly endeavored to bring this about with all their strength and resources. And in this they prepare the way for not a few bolder men who are hurrying on even to worse things, in their endeavor to obtain equality and community of all goods by the destruction of every distinction of rank and property.
Which is called what? Take away private property.
Socialism?
Socialism, yeah. So they're behind socialism and communism. So communism is one of the arms of Freemasonry. And both communism and Freemasonry are the arms and legs of the synagogue of Satan. 24. What therefore the sect of the Freemasons is and what course it pursues appears sufficiently from the summary we have briefly given. So here we just laid out the plan of the Freemasons, what their goal is, their purpose. Their chief dogmas are so greatly and manifestly at variance with reason. So here the Pope is saying, it's against reason. everything the Masons are promoting and stand for, goes against natural reason. It goes against reason that the state be godless. It's against reason that children be raised without God and prayer and the true faith. It's against natural reason that the authority comes from the people. That's a destruction of a nation. It comes from God down. And then he says that nothing, their chief dogmas are so greatly and manifestly at variance with reason that nothing can be more perverse. So he doesn't pull any punches. To wish to destroy the religion and the church, which God himself has established, and whose perpetuity he ensures by his protection, and to bring back, after a lapse of 18 centuries, the manners and customs of the pagans, is signal folly and audacious impiety. So what is he talking about here? Bringing back the manners of pagans after 18 centuries.
About the pagan, all the pagan religions that were, such as their Indian tribal
Pagan practices, pagan beliefs, the Greco-Roman paganism, which really revived at the Renaissance.
The Renaissance.
And the revival of nudity, the revival of the pagan philosophy without any link to sound theology, the revival of the arts, which are Greco-Roman, and he calls this audacious impiety, signal folly, foolishness, to go back to an age that did not know Christ and holding that as an example and model, when we have the great example of the high ages of the faith, the great saints. No one compares, even in the Old Testament, to the great St. Louis IX, St. Henry, St. Edward, St. Stephen of Hungary. Yeah, a whole list of great Catholic kings and queens. There's just no match. And they want to ignore. That's why in the Renaissance, they despise the ages of the faith, which is about from the year 500 to 1500, the Middle Ages. They're the ones that coined the phrase Middle Ages. Because for them, the golden age was the pagan era before Christ. And that's what we got to go back to, they said. So forget these dark Middle Ages. Let's go back to the golden age of Greek and Rome. And that's what Pope Leo XIII is saying. These guys they're crazy, they're out of their mind, and they're perverse. Neither is it less horrible nor more tolerable that they should repudiate the benefits which Jesus Christ has mercifully obtained, not only for individuals, but also for the family and for civil society. Benefits which even according to the judgment and testimony of enemies of Christianity are very great. So in other words, it's a horrible thing that they turn their back on all what Christ gave, that elevated the family, elevated society, elevated the state and the church, elevated education, elevated the arts, the music. It was all from our Lord Jesus Christ. That's what he's saying. How can they dare repudiate this? There's no comparison to the arts before Christ and the arts during the ages of the faith. The cathedrals, the monasteries, the gold, the monstrances, chalices, the paintings, sculptures, they're beautiful. Nothing compares. In this insane and wicked endeavor, we may almost see the implacable hatred and spirit of revenge with which Satan himself is inflamed against Jesus Christ. How did Satan get his revenge on northern Egypt, Palestine, Turkey, and all those areas that were once converted by the apostles and zealously Catholic? How did Satan have his revenge on those countries?
Firstly, with the Arian heresy. in Egypt and Palestine.
Okay, Arianism, yeah, the heresies.
And then with the invasion of the Muslims.
Exactly. The Muslims came up in the 600s, and they would just sack these countries. And they haven't stopped. And now they're invading Europe very profusely in England. I mean, now in France, England, Italy, Belgium, in most cases, it's over 50% Muslim people now, over the population of the Europeans. So they're setting up the bloodbath. It's an invasion. And the moment they blow the trumpet for jihad, which is part of their belief, the Quran, Europe will be a bloodbath. So if Europe's not conquered by Russia and punished, it'll be a bloodbath by the Muslims. All because of these blind and idiot liberals. You know. So also the studious endeavor of the Freemasons is to destroy the chief foundations of justice and honesty, and to cooperate with those who would wish, as if they were mere animals, to do what they please, tends only to the ignominious and disgraceful ruin of the human race. So what's the fruits of the Freemasons? Ruin of society. Destruction of marriage, destruction of the youth, destruction of structure, church and state. The arts go, everything becomes full of pornography, filth, drugs, legalization of drugs, especially marijuana, which really weakens a nation. And it's a disgraceful ruin of the human race. There's Freemasonry. But you can drive along the highway sometimes. I remember seeing these in the a number of years ago, 15, 20 years ago, especially in Pennsylvania on the highway. They had, thanks to Freemasons, man landed on the moon. And it shows whoever landed on the moon and he's a Freemason. Thanks to Freemasons, America is so great. And it shows Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Ben Franklin, who are all Masons, are tied into it, are friends of. And thanks to Freemasons, we have wonderful hospitals, and it shows Shriners and big-named Freemasons. But that's just all poster board stuff. Because the real goal of the Masons is precisely what Pope Leo XIII is exposing here. They want to destroy Christendom. All effects of Catholicism. They want to destroy it. And so what was their big goal? That Archbishop Lefebvre has a whole chapter devoted to in his book, They Haven't Crowned Him, the Alta Vendita. Let us get a pope to our
liking, or our needs.
And they've had 5. So, wow. You talk about the Catholic city being sacked and the walls being torn down, the sanctuary being desecrated. We're in that. It's another Babylonian invasion. But there is a part in the book of Maccabees that says, this is before Christ came, 150 years before Christ came, the Maccabean revolt. And the temple is desecrated. The sacrifices of the Old Testament have ceased. Many of the priests were killed. And they thought, this is the end of the true religion. What's going to happen? How can God abandon us? And the Maccabees rose up, of course, Judas Maccabeus and his 7 sons. And they wanted to revive the Old Testament sacrifices, which was the true religion before Christ came. But they didn't have the fire. And there's a chapter, I forget exactly where, I think it's book 2 of Maccabees. God tells them, dig up the mud from under the temple or some hidden well, and spread this mud on the altar, and it will catch fire. So they do this, the priests sprinkle it all over the altar, and the fire revives. Showing that the Catholic faith, they might try to crush it, and it might look crushed, but it will always revive. That burning fire of the Sacred Heart will always revive. It won't destroy the faith. They'll do a lot of damage, they'll take many souls to hell, but they won't destroy the Catholic Mass, the Catholic priesthood, the Catholic doctrine. They can, because we have Christ's promise. So, what a wonderful time to be a priest. What a wonderful time to be Catholic. When our Lord is most betrayed. So we have to pray to the Virgin Mary for fidelity, always. Okay, we will pick up next time. Auditorium nostrum in nomine Domini.